Okay, so you want to own a gated community. You're on the couch looking at drone footage of some development with a guardhouse and a fountain at the entrance, and in your head, you're already the guy collecting checks from everyone who lives behind that gate. Build some houses, put up a fence, charge a monthly fee forever. Easy. It's basically a subscription business with a driveway. Here's the problem. The gate isn't selling security, it's selling a feeling. And the actual business underneath it runs on a pile of money that hundreds of homeowners are trusting one person to manage honestly. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why that single point of trust has produced one of the largest fraud cases in American Homeowner Association history, why gated has almost nothing to do with what's actually keeping anyone out, and why the real product being sold at that entrance isn't safety at all. It's psychology, wrapped around a checkbook that hundreds of people never actually get to see. There are three real tiers of this business, and they're really three different businesses wearing the same gate. Tier 1 is the basic gated subdivision, 50 to 100 homes, an automated gate with a keypad or transponder, no live guard, no staffed booth at all. As a developer, you're looking at land acquisition plus infrastructure costs, roads, utilities, storm drainage, and the gate system itself, running $3 million to $8 million depending on lot count and location before a single house goes up. Getting the land entitled for residential development alone can take a year or more of navigating local zoning and permitting, and that's before construction crews break ground on the first road. For reference, that's more money moving through one deal than you'll earn across your entire working life, and it's still considered the entry-level version of this business. Tier 2 is the guard-gated community with real amenities, a staffed gatehouse, a clubhouse, a pool. Guard staffing alone typically adds $50 to $150 a month to every homeowner's dues, compared to an automated-only gate, because you're paying for round-the-clock coverage, not just a keypad. Development costs at this tier run $15 million to $40 million for a mid-sized community, covering not just the roads and utilities, but the clubhouse construction, pool infrastructure, and landscaping design that makes the community feel like a resort rather than a subdivision. Homeowners here are paying real money for the feeling of being checked at the door, whether or not it actually stops anything. Tier 3 is the guard-gated country club community, a golf course, a full clubhouse with dining, resort-style amenities, homes well into seven figures. Development costs here can exceed $100 million once you include championship-grade golf course construction, which alone can run $8 million to $20 million depending on the design firm and terrain, plus the clubhouse, tennis facilities, and a security infrastructure that goes well beyond a single guardhouse. Monthly HOA dues in communities like this routinely run $500 to $1,200 or more, and that's before optional golf membership fees that can add several $100s more a month on top for residents who actually want to use the course. At this tier, the golf course alone needs a dedicated grounds crew, irrigation infrastructure, and clubhouse staff, and homeowners who never once play a round of golf are still paying a share of keeping it green through their base dues. But construction costs are the part everybody budgets for. It's what happens after the ribbon cutting that actually determines whether this business works, and it's worth knowing the scale of what you're stepping into before we get to the specific risks. There are roughly 377,000 community associations across the United States today, housing an estimated 80 million people, and that number keeps climbing every year as more new development gets built, with an HOA structure baked in from day one. That's not a niche corner of real estate, that's tens of millions of households, each one trusting a board of volunteers or a hired management company with a bank account that, in the worst cases, nobody outside a small circle ever actually verifies. The first cost is HOA fraud risk, and this is the thing this entire video is built around. In the Hammocks, a community in southwest Miami-Dade County, Florida, the HOA president and her husband ran a scheme that stole more than $11 million from the association over years, fabricating vendor invoices, inflating contract amounts, and funneling the money for personal use. Roughly 18,000 residents were affected. Investigators eventually found hundreds of hidden financial documents stashed inside a spa business the couple owned. Not a shredder, not an offshore account, a spa. The Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office called it one of the largest known HOA fraud cases in the country's history, and the former president alone faced up to 195 years in prison before taking a plea deal for 7 years behind bars and 7 years of probation. Her husband agreed to 7 years probation and forfeited a $1.2 million property as part of his own plea. 8 people total were arrested in connection with the scheme, and as of the plea deal, 4 more related cases were still pending. For scale, $11 million is more money than you, everyone you know, and everyone they know will collectively earn in your lifetimes, taking a homeowner's check at a time, disguised as landscaping invoices. This is not a rare edge case dressed up for a video. Smaller versions of exactly this pattern show up constantly across the country, and they follow an almost identical playbook every time. A Winter Springs, Florida property manager stole nearly $600,000 from a single HOA to cover rent, car repairs, and family expenses over an 8-month investigation before anyone caught on. A Minneapolis area HOA financial manager pleaded guilty to embezzling over $1 million from associations she managed, using her access to bookkeeping systems and vendor payments to quietly siphon funds transaction by transaction. A Texas HOA manager was separately accused of running up $53,000 on HOA-issued cards for DoorDash and Amazon orders, small enough charges that they blended into a busy monthly ledger for months. The mechanism is always the same: one person with unsupervised access to the bank account and a board of volunteer homeowners who trusted a monthly summary report instead of pulling the actual bank statements themselves. The second cost is reserve fund underfunding, and it's a much quieter problem that eventually becomes just as expensive. Roads, gates, clubhouse roofs, and pool equipment all have a defined useful life, and a responsibly run HOA sets aside reserve funds every year to cover eventual replacement, typically based on a professional reserve study that projects when each major asset will need work and how much it will cost in future dollars. Many associations don't fund this adequately, either because a developer set dues artificially low in the early years to make the community more attractive to first buyers competing against non-gated alternatives, or because homeowner boards, elected by residents who don't want to pay more, repeatedly vote to keep dues flat rather than raise them to what a reserve study actually recommends. When a major expense finally comes due, repaving every road in the community, replacing a failing gate system, re-roofing a clubhouse, an underfunded HOA has no choice but to levy a special assessment, a one-time bill on top of regular dues that can run into the thousands of dollars per household with little warning, arriving right around the time everyone assumed their monthly dues already covered it. The third cost is the security theater problem, and it's one longtime residents figure out eventually, even if new buyers never do. A decorative wall and a guarded gate stop almost nobody determined to get in. Most residential fencing can be climbed by anyone motivated enough, and delivery drivers, contractors, landscapers, and guests are buzzed through dozens of times a day, regardless of the guard sitting in the booth. Academic research on gated communities has found the actual security benefit is real but modest, while the price premium buyers pay for that feeling of security is consistently measurable. Homes in gated communities sell for roughly $30,000 more on average than comparable non-gated homes nearby, according to research from the American Real Estate Society. You're not really buying a wall. You're buying the psychological effect of a wall and paying a very real $30,000 premium for it, which, incidentally, is more than the entire value of everything you currently own. Stack those three together: the ever-present risk that whoever controls the checkbook decides to help themselves, the quiet compounding damage of an underfunded reserve fund, and a security benefit that's more perception than substance, and you start to see why a gated community's real risk profile has almost nothing to do with what happens outside the gate and everything to do with what happens inside the HOA's own financial records. Here's how this business actually generates money, and the mechanics run in layers most buyers never think about. Because from the outside, it looks like a neighborhood with a fee attached, when it's really 4 separate overlapping revenue streams stacked on top of each other, each one collected in a different way, at a different point, from a different pool of people. The first mechanic is the resale premium, and it's the cleanest money in the entire business, collected once per home with no ongoing service obligation attached to it. That roughly $30,000 average premium gated communities command over comparable non-gated homes means a developer selling 200 homes at that markup has generated $6 million in extra revenue purely from the psychological value of the gate. Not from anything the gate physically does, not from any additional security service actually delivered, just from what buyers believe a gate signals about a neighborhood. The second mechanic is recurring HOA dues, and this is where the real long-term money lives if you're the one managing the association or the developer who retains control of it. A community of 400 homes paying an average of $300 a month in dues generates $1.44 million a year in guaranteed recurring revenue year after year, regardless of what the housing market is doing, because the dues are contractually mandatory for anyone who owns property inside the gate. For scale, that's more predictable annual income than you will personally earn across several years combined, generated automatically every single month whether the economy is booming or in a recession. That's a more reliable income stream than almost any other part of residential real estate, which is exactly why it's also the part that attracts the kind of person willing to fabricate invoices to skim from it. The third mechanic is transfer and capital improvement fees, and it's a quiet toll that recurs every time a home changes hands. Many HOAs and developer-controlled communities charge a transfer fee at closing, often a flat few $100s, sometimes a percentage of sale price, that goes straight to the association, or, in some cases, directly to the original developer for years after the community was fully built out. On a community that turns over even 10% of its homes every year, a normal turnover rate for a residential neighborhood, a $500 transfer fee on 400 homes generates $20,000 a year in pure secondary revenue that has nothing to do with the dues homeowners already pay monthly, collected almost invisibly at the closing table where nobody thinks to question it. The fourth mechanic is amenity monetization, and it's how the country club tier communities offset that massive golf course maintenance bill. Guest fees, clubhouse event rentals for weddings and parties, and optional golf memberships for non-resident players all generate revenue that helps cover the enormous fixed cost of keeping a championship golf course green year-round, regardless of how many residents actually use it. A clubhouse that hosts even a handful of paid weddings a year at $8,000 to $15,000 each can meaningfully offset costs that would otherwise fall entirely on resident dues. And some country club communities generate more revenue from outside events and non-resident golf memberships than from the golf-specific portion of resident dues combined, which is exactly why so many of these communities actively court outside wedding business, even though it means strangers driving through the gate every single weekend, the same gate that was supposedly there to keep strangers out in the first place. Let's run the numbers on a mid-sized Tier 2 guard-gated community, 300 homes, staffed gatehouse, clubhouse, and pool. Optimistic scenario, average dues of $250 a month across 300 homes generates $900,000 a year in HOA revenue. Guard staffing, landscaping, insurance, and routine maintenance run about $650,000 for the year. Net operating surplus, roughly $250,000, which gets added to reserves for future capital projects, a healthy, well-run year that most homeowners never think twice about, with board meetings that run 20 minutes and nobody showing up angry. That's more money flowing through one community's books in a single year than most individual homeowners inside that gate will save across their entire working lives, and it happens quietly, on autopilot, every single year the board does its job correctly. Realistic scenario, the community's 20-year-old road network needs resurfacing. A $400,000 project the underfunded reserve account can only cover a third of, because the board kept dues flat for a decade to avoid complaints. The board levies a special assessment of roughly $900 per household to cover the gap, and the resulting homeowner meeting runs 3 hours instead of 20 minutes. At the same time, the guard staffing contract renews at a 12% higher rate due to rising regional labor costs, adding $35,000 to annual expenses that weren't in the original budget. A tree falls on a section of perimeter fencing during a storm, adding another $18,000 in unplanned repair costs. Run all three of those through the same year, and the $250,000 optimistic surplus turns into essentially a wash, a net position under $10,000 after the assessment covers the shortfall, with homeowners considerably angrier than they were in January over a bill nobody budgeted for, and a board now facing pressure to explain why reserves were so thin in the first place. Then there's the scenario that actually devastates a community, and it's not hypothetical, an HOA fraud case on the scale of the hammocks. When $11 million disappears from an association serving thousands of residents. The fallout isn't just the stolen money itself, it's years of deferred maintenance that never happened because the funds meant to pay for it were quietly gone, special assessments to cover the shortfall once it's finally discovered, a community-wide legal battle that drags on for years, and a reputational hit that depresses home values for everyone behind that gate, whether they had anything to do with the fraud or not. Buyers researching a community after a scandal like that becomes public will find it in seconds, and it follows a neighborhood's reputation for years after the last court date. For scale, that $11 million is more money than every homeowner behind that gate will personally save across their entire lives, combined, taken by one person their community trusted with a checkbook hidden inside a spa business for years before anyone noticed. That's the real lesson of this business. The gate was never the security feature. The security feature, or the vulnerability, depending on who's holding the keys, is whoever has signing authority on the HOA bank account. A community can have the tallest wall, the most alert guard, and the most expensive keypad system in the county, and none of it matters if the person managing the money decides, quietly, over several years, to help themselves. The hammocks had a guarded entrance too. It didn't stop a dime of the $11 million that walked out the back door of the association's own bank account because nobody was guarding that. And that's the gap between the business you thought you were buying into and the one you actually own. So, if you do decide to buy into or run a gated community, remember the one thing that actually determines whether it holds up over decades. Not the height of the wall, not the guard in the booth, but who's watching the checkbook behind it, and whether anyone on that board is actually pulling the bank statements themselves instead of trusting the summary. Close the drone footage. You were never going to be the guy at the fountain anyway.